Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Outlook. I'm Luke Anthony, and for this episode I was joined by fellow comedian Matt Price. Wow, what can I say about Matt? He's just a great comedian. He tells extraordinary stories. They're often outrageous, but he tells them in such a believable, likeable way. But he's so adaptable. He'll adapt to any environment. He'll just make sure that everyone has a good night, whether it's putting up a chair to talk to the audience, doing one-liners, doing puns, doing jokes. You know, whatever's needed to ensure that people have a good night and their money's well spent. He'll be that comedian, and it's just phenomenal. If you're a new comic, I highly recommend going to see Matt because you'll learn so many great techniques off the man. He also does a fantastic podcast called Conversations with Criminals. It's a brilliant podcast. I highly recommend you go and give that a listen after you've listened to this episode. And before you leave this episode, and when you get to the end of this episode, or even now, just go now and just hit 5 stars on this podcast. I would also like to just say a big thank you to 22 North Street, who have been allowing me to record in their little function room downstairs for all of these episodes that I've been doing recently. So I really appreciate that. You know what? If you are in London, you're in Clapham, you want to have a nice dinner, go down to 22 North Street. It's well worth your time. It's a lovely place, and the room downstairs is beautiful. It's like hidden in what looks like a bookcase. It's actually a door, and then inside you've got this beautiful dining room. It's absolutely lovely. Yeah, so highly recommend that. And before I ramble on at you any longer, please welcome to the show a fantastic comedian, brilliant podcaster, and just a wonderful man, Matt Price. So you've taken numerous shows to Edinburgh. You've had some very critically acclaimed shows up there. Your most recent one was well, it went really well, didn't it? It was the Underbelly.
It was, yeah. They generally go well. You know, it's nice, isn't it? I think who was John Hastings described it as Edinburgh as the end of year exams one time, and I think he's right. And so mostly I passed the exams. You know, you get the occasional bad review, which is part of it. You're going to get that. You know, people liked it, some people hated it. I did a joke about an ice cream that I can show you later that someone walked out of the show.
Oh, great.
This year. But overall, yeah, it was good and I enjoy it. You know, it was a good show, and now I'm on to the next thing.
And the name for it was Broken Hooters and Geezers with Shooters.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how the name came about.
Well, because I know people who are on the wrong side of the law. To call them criminals might not be doing them quite justice. I'm very good friends with 2 retired criminals, 2 geezers from South London, and I met them sort of 6 years ago, and their life is extraordinary because they can't commit crimes anymore, so they have to earn a living any way they can, and it's not through illegal means. So they can't go and work in Tesco, so they would be recognised, but they have to be very creative in how they earn a living, which can mean after dinner speaking. It can mean hiring out their sex dungeon to various people for porn shoots. They've had a rave in their back garden as well, a Vietnamese rave. So they're up to all sorts of stuff. They're like the sort of Del Boy and Rodney of the criminal underworld. And I'm good mates with them. And Broken Hooters, Hooters being your nose, and Geezers with Shooters. I guess it's a sort of a Mickey take of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, which is a great film, obviously. But yeah, that's so.
But we're meant to be funny and comedy, and so we need to sort of twist these things and make them.
Well, a little bit, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds hilarious the way I'm selling it, doesn't it? But it was a good show, and it was just about meeting these guys and. You know, and talking about my experiences with these people who are on the wrong side of the law and how they kind of guided me. I've always described them as the most inappropriate life coaches. I've learned a lot about myself from them. You know, they've been very good to me, and the show was about them and my relationship with them.
Okay, so I was hoping to get onto the podcast a bit later, but the podcast it's called Conversations with Criminals.
Mm.
Now, how did that first come about? What put you in that position to speak to these people and record it for a podcast?
Okay, I mean, look, nearly everything I've done in life, whether it's comedy or my work in life or the podcast, it always happens by accident. It always does. You know, I met this guy, I'm going to call him the boss, and he just said to me, "Do you want to come up to my house?" And I said, "Okay," and I went up.
Under duress.
How could I resist? You know, and I went up there and I met him. I spent about 10 hours in his company, and he said, "Would you help me on a writing project?" I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll help you do that, no problem." And I've just got to know them very well.
As friends.
As friends, they're friends of mine. They have never done anything to hurt me. They could, but they haven't. And 6 years down the line, we're still really good pals. And so, Brian will phone me up. Brian's the boss's right-hand man. He'll phone me up and he'll tell me what they've been up to. And it's great fun and we have a laugh. They're just genuinely, they're very nice people to me. I met them as people and it suddenly struck me, actually, criminals are very interesting people. They are, if you get to know them. And of course, the podcast came about through, because I have the contacts for one thing, but it also came about for the fact that my missus, Martha McBriar, who's a very good comedian, she got attacked 13 years ago. The guy nearly killed her. And, so I couldn't do anything, couldn't take violent revenge. And the podcast is the questions that I might have had to have answered had I have taken violent revenge against the guy who attacked her and nearly killed her. So I could have shared a prison cell with anybody. So I meet these two guys, Brian and the boss. We're really good pals. And of course, helping them with this project, I'm recording them. And I thought, wow, I need to meet people like you. I put it on a podcast. And that's how it happened.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so much sense. It's amazing that it's I mean, how did you first meet these guys? Or was it in a pub? Was it?
It was actually, he was doing a kind of an after dinner thing. And I was on Rob Heaney's People with Stories podcast, which he's now bringing back. And I told the story of Martha getting attacked. And I got a phone call from a guy called Stabvest Steve. Now, you can terminate this interview right now if you want, because I sound ridiculous. I sound like the nutter in the pub. But, so he phones me up. Hello, my nan thinks you sound like a really nice geezer. I'm not a weirdo. And do you want to come and meet me and my nan and have dinner? I couldn't resist. So I met him. He introduced me to Brian and the boss. The rest is history.
I love how he uses nan as a way of sort of softening the blow. So, okay, if a nan's there, it must be safe. It must be right.
Of course, yeah.
What's she going to do? Bite me with her gums?
Well, you never know, do you? I mean, it is a cliche. It sounds like just one series of cliches sort of put together. Oh, he loves his nan. But that is how it happened.
Yeah. But the truth is that the podcast does exist. And
yes.
And it's very real, and the conversations you have are very true and quite revealing from the ones at least I've listened to. Now, a lot of comedians hope and pray to be put into difficult situations or situations where they might get 10 minutes of material that could set out a room or, get them a little bit further along the comedy ladder.
Sure, yeah.
How much of doing the podcast has influenced your material?
It depends, because I met Brian and the boss a few years ago anyway when I went to Turkey. So I did a very impromptu show about going over to Turkey with Colin Manford and Cole Parker and sort of running for our lives. So I was already talking about criminals then anyway. And the podcast isn't a funny podcast. I mean, there's some points in it are really funny, but it's just generally me sat down with someone in a public place, sometimes, quite often, and having a chat, and that's it. So it doesn't. Sometimes it does, but the thing about it is, I don't know what you think about truth in comedy. Audiences, as much as I love them, they don't always believe what we're saying. They quite often assume we're making stuff up. They do,
because we're just trying to do it for a laugh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have stood there on stage with sometimes, just close to tears, pouring my heart out, talking about Martha and everything that's happened to her and stuff that's happened to me. And still, someone will come up to me after a show, especially in Edinburgh, and say, oh, can I ask you a question? And I think, oh, they're going to want to know, what happened. Maybe they've known someone who's been attacked, and they'll always say, are you really from Cornwall? And it's just such a ridiculous thing to say. And I go, oh, no, I just made it up. just to make myself sound windswept and interesting. Why would I lie about that? So I'm not knocking audiences, but they tend not to believe what we say anyway. But I do agree, however, that experience can be great. Experience can really help you produce comedy. Of course it can, So
yeah, of course, experience is what feeds our comedy. There's no doubt about that. But it's just, you're right. You're right. The audiences do expect you to say something that's believable, at least.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, it's the willed suspension of disbelief, isn't it? Really. And so I'm not offended when people say, "Oh, that didn't happen" or whatever. No, that's okay. I've been paid now, so I'll see you later.
Yeah, no problem.
There's a difference between sort of truth and authenticity, and it has to be authentic before it's true. Sometimes, and it's, if I was to tell the absolute truth about everything as it happened, it would just be, well, I met this guy and he beat someone with a hammer. Well, that's not really funny. It's truthful,
Yeah.
But I need to try and soften something like that if I'm going to do it, and it's still true, but you have to make it authentic, and you have to. For me personally, I have to make it palatable above all else.
Yeah, and I think it automatically becomes unique because it's from your perspective, is your take on it. And I quite liked. I was listening to an interview with Billy Connolly recently, very, very, very recently, with Nihal Arthanaika, and he's saying that Billy Connolly always tells the truth about the stuff, but he embellishes the truth. So it could be a very simple thing that's happened, and then he will, obviously he's influenced a lot of us storytellers, big time, but he'll embellish everything else, and then that one concept gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it could end up being like a 20-minute bit. And his whole persona is about getting lost on stage and bringing it back to the point eventually. But I guess as comedians we have to embellish the truth, but we also need to be believable. They need to believe it when you're saying it.
Absolutely.
But with a concept like you're dealing with, like conversations with criminals, it's almost like you need to have a clip of it, a 30-second clip, and then talk on the back of it.
Yes.
For them to get up to speed with what you're going to talk about.
Well, I did that in Edinburgh, actually. I had a clip of me in a former gangland criminal's house with a homemade flamethrower. And which is ridiculous. It just happened to make a homemade flamethrower. It was a Super Soaker water pistol with 2 litres of petrol in a Coke bottle attached to it. And he made me squirt it. He didn't force me to, but he go on that. So I'm squirting it onto a bonfire, and you can see the flames coming up. And he's going, "Oh, you like that? That's sexy." So that was one of my starting point for the show in Edinburgh this year, to kind of show people, look, this is real. I know it's a bit weird, I know it's a bit off the wall, but this is a real person. And of course the argument could be, well, hang on, maybe you got your dad to do it, or maybe you got one of your mates to do it. Maybe you got Mad Ron to come and do it. But no, I got the real life Mad Ron to come and do it. But even then, people might say, oh, well, no, I don't believe that was true. So and that's fine. It's all right. Not everyone's going to believe what you're saying, but I try and make it as authentic as possible, and I never try and justify what I'm doing. Our job is to try and entertain people. So I've changed a little bit over the years. I used to get hung up on truth years ago. Everything has to be completely true, and you have to have integrity. Whereas, of course, the reality of the job as a working comic is you have to turn up to the middle of nowhere quite often and do a job to an audience who have no idea who you are. And that's not a bad thing. I like the anonymity of it sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
But, but the fact is, as a working comic, you have to just make an audience laugh. And the one rule is, of course, don't take anyone else's material. But outside of that, get the audience in, use a whole range of techniques in order to engage them, make them laugh, say thanks very much, good night, and hope that you get booked back in again.
And a lot of it, like you say, is becoming likable and instantly being impressionable on the audience from the moment even before you've been announced. If you're about, then you got to be. And you're one of those comedians that's got this natural ability to just get people on side, like your material and the way you kind of. Every comedian wants to feel like they're just sitting in a living room with their friends and talking to people, and you've mastered that with your comedy. It's you're so well respected in the scene, and you've just got this ability to get everyone on side and just have a conversation that is really, really funny, and I really admire that in your comedy.
Well, I think the key to it is, or certainly for me, is trying to like the audience. I have to remind myself a little bit before I go. I don't do it every time. I'm not sat backstage limbering up and doing breathing exercises. I don't want anyone to think that. But you do have to remind yourself, well, actually, I do want to be here. I do like audiences. I like people. So that helps me to relax. And I remind myself I've done it before. And so I walk out completely relaxed. I learned how to relax, actually, which is good. And I look at the room. I look quite often at what's going on in the room. Sometimes you're blind, so you have to pace yourself differently. And I look and I think, okay, this is how I'm going to play it. And sometimes it can be more low key off the top, because meeting an audience is like meeting a person. Sometimes you say hello, and sometimes the best people, of course, you take a little while to get to know. And that can be the same with audiences as well. But the thing is, if you've got half an hour, say a half-hour set to do, you can start off slowly and you can build and build and build. Sometimes, of course, the energy is really high, so you walk out and you go at a different pace. So it's about pacing, obviously, and about timing, so that's nothing new. But I try to deliver the material in about 6 different ways sometimes. I think if material's good, then then you can deliver it in about half a dozen different ways. And sometimes that doesn't always help, because people say, "Oh, you're a storytelling comedian." Actually, I'm a professional comedian, and I turn up and I entertain people. I entertain that room in front of me. Sorry, not that. I entertain the people who are in front of me, and I do so to the best of my ability. And sometimes I'm sat on a stool. There are other times I'm stood on a table shouting at the top of my voice without a microphone, just because that's what I feel is necessary for the room. You wouldn't look twice if a singer did an electric guitar routine and then said, "Right, I'm going to do one unplugged." You wouldn't bat an eyelid. So why should it be any different for a comedian?
Yeah,
is my question.
Okay, I don't have the answer to that.
No,
I think it's a rhetorical question. If you do have the answer, please do get in touch.
Absolutely.
And we'd love to know. It would really help. The other thing is that with that, I mean, firstly, how long did it take you to be that flexible and versatile with audiences?
Okay, I can remember it almost happened overnight. It was 2009, and I was always very self-conscious, because the one thing, the stick that people beat me with is my appearance. They always have. "Oh, look at the way you look." Oh, so people said, "Oh, you're so repulsive." Yeah, whatever, mate. I mean, I'm still earning a living. I'm still doing my thing. And I used to be very self-conscious. I couldn't even look at an audience. I felt really bad about it. And my missus, Martha, she said to me one day, "Why have you got that kind of aggression about you?" She said, "You're not an aggressive person off stage. Why can't you enjoy their company?" And it was like a switch that sort of flicked in my head. She said, just be the nice guy that you are. There's nothing wrong with being nice. And I remember I was in South Wimbledon at the Grove, which is now a Tesco's, which is a shame. Grown men were crying when that pub closed. And it was a Monday night gig. There was just a curtain there. And it was at Bob Walsh, who I absolutely adore, great bloke. It was his gig. And I can remember just going up and just enjoying the audience's company for the first time. And I think for me, I can't speak about anybody. I can't tell anybody what to do or how to approach their comedy. It's a journey that we're all on. But I just suddenly learned one day, no, actually, I'm going to enjoy everybody's company. And I'm going to, dance while everybody's watching. It just doesn't matter. You can spend so much of your life worrying about what other people think and feeling bad about everything. And I try not to do that. It just doesn't mean I don't die, because of course I do sometimes. But I always try my best, and I always try and be in the moment, and always try and say yes to everything on stage as well. That's why I improvise quite a lot. And most of all, I try and enjoy it. And I really think that's important.
So how many years into comedy did that take you then? How many years were you into comedy at that point?
I would have been going for maybe 8 years, something like that. One of these guys, I've been going forever. I've been around for I first stepped foot on stage in about 2001. Dabbled for a couple of years, didn't really do an awful lot. Was in the Laughing Horse final in 2004. So even if I want to call that the official start, that's still quite a long time.
Yeah.
And of course, that can be a double-edged sword, because yes, you're experienced or a veteran, and they can be quite loaded terms, can't they? Sometimes, in the same way that storytelling can be a pejorative term. But I always say to people, listen, you try being a comedian for 15 years and getting booked regularly. It's not an easy game. Depends what you want. Depends what you want. Yeah.
I mean, if it's quite well known now in the comedy scene. If you want to be a working comedian, you can be, and you can earn an okay living. If you work out, I think it was Steve McLean that worked it out with me, was that if you want to earn, you can probably earn 25 grand quite quickly a year from being a comedian.
Yeah.
But there's an extra level to that. It depends how far you want to go. Do you want to be doing closing shows 20 minutes each time, or doing 10-minute routines for the rest of your life, or do you want to be doing hour-long shows and touring a show? It depends how ambitious you are, I guess, with it.
Yeah, well, ambition comes into it, but also opportunity as well. And I don't really know about any of that. I don't get the politics of it. I don't really get involved in the politics of it either. And bear in mind, I've seen a lot of very good people, very good friends of mine, be very successful. So if I sit here and slag off the industry or be negative about it in any way, then I'm kind of being disparaging of them, and I would never do that.
Yeah.
One of my best mates in comedy is Larry Dean. Well, Larry Dean's excellent, right? So I can't sit here and say, oh, I wish that the industry would acknowledge me, because in a way, that's not being disparaging, but that's undermining what anyone else has achieved.
And the great work that they've done and these
they've
achievements
done
of
a lot
theirs,
work.
yeah.
You know, and I look at people who've been on television and I think, well, good luck to you. You know, would I like it to be me? Of course. I'd like the money that would come with it. I'd like the profile that would come with it.
And the autonomy with the, you know, material and being able to, you know, justifying it a little bit more. You know, travelling up and down the country, driving, you know, spending so much time away from home, and it can be a lonely life.
Well, it can be. I mean, it's one of those things. I'm lucky. The missus, the boss, the governor, Martha. You know, she's very understanding of it all. And you know, I mean, I went away to Australia for like 3.5 months one year. You know, so it's a long time to be away. I'll never be away that long again. I've done 30 countries. You know, I've been around. You get to see some very interesting things when you're a working comedian. There is, once again, people sort of label club comedy as a certain thing as well. Listen, I've had some of the best nights of my life on stage as a club comedian. You see amazing things sometimes.
Yeah, some of the best comedy. I mean, we tend to watch most of our comedy in comedy clubs anyway. So
yeah,
that's, you know, watching other acts and everything. But you've been to Dubai, you've been to Abu Dhabi, you've been in Southeast Asia, all over the world with your comedy.
Yes.
How have you adapted your material to suit the geographical locations you've been at?
Well, everyone likes banter. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. Everyone likes interaction. Depending on how it's done. You know, and I'm not afraid to banter with people or to ask what happens next. I spend my whole life wanting to know what happens next. So I'm not frightened to drop the material if someone does something or says something, and just kind of go, no, it's okay, tell me more. And so, you know, so that does that. So banter is a good thing to be able to do, and that connection with an audience. And also, like as far as Southeast Asia went, for the most part, they understand British culture extremely well. So it's not that difficult. You know, I did a story over there in 2012 about working in a fish factory in Cornwall. And I was concerned, you know, on the first night in Malaysia, thinking, oh, maybe they're not going to go with this. And someone said, oh, no, that was great. No, I really understand that.
Oh, great.
So you just never know where you're going to be. There is part of the human condition. You know, I'm not Mother Teresa or anything, but, you know, there are certain shared experiences that we can have. So on the one level, it's about working in a fish factory, you could argue, the story that I was telling. But on the other, it's just about people and finding out who your friends are. Well, anyone can relate to that experience if you sell it in the right way. And that comes back to how you present your material as well. You know, sometimes it is acoustic, sometimes it's hard rock.
Yeah,
You know?
I understand.
So what I tend to do is put the emphasis upon different places in the story. So people might not be able to relate to Cornwall, but they can relate to workplace bullying, for example. So then you put the emphasis upon that. So
and
you
that's
speed
the joke,
up.
and the joke centres around that rather
Yeah,
than the
absolutely
other subjects.
That's how I try and do it.
Okay.
Sell it in a different way. You know, I think I don't do quite so many student gigs. I don't think there are as many student gigs as there used to be, but there is a way of sort of selling yourself as an older comedian to a younger audience. Of course there is. All the lecturers are a similar age. All the lecturers are sort of 40 plus. So there's a way in which you can say to an audience, hey, look, I know you're 18, but I was 18 once. Check this story out. So it's all about framing, I think.
Yeah, it's all about framing. That's interesting.
For me.
For you, yes. It's not. You're not speaking for the rest of the
and that gives
comedy
me
world.
that gives me the confidence then.
Yeah.
To be able to do it.
So you're happy just jumping up on stage pretty much anywhere?
Yes, I am, because I'm sort of realistic about stuff. You know, I would like to be as successful as I can possibly be, but for whatever reason that hasn't happened. Now, what I can do, of course, is be upset about it and blame this, that, or the other. But I do like the art form. I love it. I love comedy. You know, I like writing stuff. You know, was writing stuff last night. It was great. I was having, just suddenly I thought, oh wow, I'm gonna have to get up and just write. So I did, and I like that. I like creating things and seeing
like
whether
a
it
curse
works.
sometimes, isn't it? Where
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Trying to fall asleep and just this idea comes, and you know for a fact that if you, I've been said on every comedian's podcast, I'm sure, but if you wake up in the morning and it's gone, and there's that, if I'd just woken up and written that note, I would have had 10 minutes of great material.
Oh yeah, and sometimes I'll write something in my phone, and then I'll think, oh, that's amazing. Thank goodness, I'm so glad that I typed that. And then you wake up in the morning and you go, what the hell was that? You're an idiot, mate. What are you thinking of that? It doesn't really make much sense. I wish I'd kept one of the notes from the other day that I made, because it was just didn't make any sense. It was funny. The actual Note itself was funny. It was about people's names or something. But I just thought, this is just so stupid.
Yeah, it commonly happens to me where I note something down, but I forget what was funny about it.
Yeah.
So I recognise the word. I don't know. Wrote something down. I can't think of a word that I've written down recently, and then forgotten everything that surrounded it. And then I think one of them just popped up again, and I remembered it on stage.
Yeah.
And then delivered it as I remember it. But I just suddenly just hit me, and it just came to me. And it's such a good feeling.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best feeling in the world where you just get that rush of inspiration. And even better when it happens when you're in front of an audience and it's fresh to you and to the audience.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I don't know how you find the torture of trying out new material. I mean, I love it, but I hate it at the same time. And I'm lucky that when I do the new material, quite often I'm on with someone who will inspire me and will go, look, it doesn't matter how bad, how bad this goes. We have to try it. That's what we do. We're comedians. You have to psych yourself up, even whether you're experienced or not. I have to really fire myself up to just go out and do the lampshade joke. It doesn't matter if they don't like it. It does matter. Breaks your heart. Of course it does. It's like, it can be devastating when it doesn't work well, but you have to force yourself to try new stuff, and you have to accept as well. And I don't know how you are. Once again, I'm up there, and I might do a couple of jokes that I know work, and I'm thinking, okay, right, the new bit's coming, deliver it with the same passion. And of course, I go from having a natural delivery sometimes, and in my head, then I'm really monotone.
Yeah.
And I'm delivering, what's the deal with lampshades? And then no one laughs, and I'm like, oh no. And then you move on to a bit that and then you try another new bit. It can be really painful trying it. And then, of course, sometimes it happens straight away.
Yeah, and that's the best
how
bit.
How lucky.
If you're lucky, luck. Hey, that's so funny, isn't it? Because as comedians, when we fail, we blame ourselves and completely say, "Oh, that was awful. You're a terrible writer. You're terrible at comedy."
Yeah.
But then when it goes really well, we said, "Oh, I got lucky there."
Well, Martha always says to me, "Look, what do you mean that joke didn't work? How did you deliver it? Did you perform it, or were you reciting it?" And I'll go, and I make her sound like she's nagging me. She's not. She cares. And she, but she'll just say, look, you've got to try that again. There's nothing wrong with that. And then she'll say to me, I bet I know exactly what you did. I bet you went out there, you did the bit that works, and then you recited it in monotone fashion, probably looked at your feet, which is not uncommon, and then thought, okay, thanks. And then went on to the next bit. Did you need to go out and perform it like there's someone holding a gun to your head?
Yeah.
So, there's a certain amount of, you have to, rehearse it and go over it. I mean, I wish I knew a way in which I could guarantee the success of new material. Unfortunately, you can't. Yeah. And do you know, I remember years ago, it must have been 5 years ago now, when Pear Shaped and Fitzrovia was on, I can remember going along three times over a month on a Wednesday night and trying the same stuff. And there was an audience member who'd seen me 3 times, and he bought me a pint, and he just said, so what is it that you do for a living then? Because that was just so painful. I really respect you for having a go, and I'm not going to say to him, well, actually, because I don't need to do that. I just said, oh, thanks for the pint, mate. I appreciate it. But he'd seen me a couple of times at Pear Shaped and one time somewhere else. Just trying this new stuff that just didn't work. You try it 3 times on nights where you can fail. But the reason I'm telling you that is because I think it's important to try and protect yourself and your own sort of self-worth and your ego, as it were. We all fail sometimes. It's fine to fail. Fail is good.
It's I mean, to coin a cliche, it's how you bounce back, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
And it is a cliche, but it's so true. Because for me, like when I early on because I've been acting and did comedy from quite young, like 16, and I was acting since 7. But and then comedy, I started comedy in like 16, and then gave it quite a prolonged break, and came back to it, and with a completely different outlook on life and things like that. But I felt like when I used to do like creative things, for me, it was as the minute someone said one bad thing about it, or had one bad opinion about it, that was it. I was like, I can't do this, I'm rubbish.
Yeah.
And I gave up. It took me a long time, and even now, like to think that actually no, you are good. That you just remember that, those 20 great gigs that you did a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah.
And they went well. You might not be working now, but this has been working before. You just need to come at it again from a fresh point of view.
Happens to all of us. Do you know, I was, because I did comedy in Cardiff, lived in South Wales for a long time. So we ran a gig over there, and I was a resident compere. And of course, I'm learning my trade at that particular point, and I didn't quite know why it went badly or why it went well. It didn't make any sense. You don't realise. It took me quite a long time to discover, this is why. Fast forward 12 years, I was dying horrifically at a gig, and there was somebody who used to go to that gig in Cardiff, who saw me, hadn't seen me for 12 years. He'd seen me die in Cardiff, and he'd seen me 12 years later. And he came up to me and said, what were you doing? Why are you still doing this to yourself? You don't have to do this. You can do something else. And I just laughed about it because, just how unlucky is that? That's unlucky. Yeah.
I get that though. Like when, performing in the town that you live, you obviously meet and see the same people quite regularly, the same comedians there. You're booked onto the same sort of promoters gigs and stuff. And if you're early on or you're having a particularly bad spell and you just happen to be seen by the same person numerous times, it's really hard to get rid of that kind of impression of you, especially if it's a promoter.
Yeah, of course it is. No, it is. And people forget it is possible to evolve in this game as well. I'm not knocking anybody, but, I'm trying to lose the label of storytelling comedian because, like I said, it can be a pejorative term sometimes, and it just means not funny, or it means that you ramble. Whereas, I'm not having a go at anyone, but I'm just saying, listen, I'm a comedian. That's what I do. I tell stories, I tell jokes, I interact. I enjoy the company of an audience.
Just to fight back on that thing for people saying about storytelling comedy. The greatest British comedian probably of all time is Billy Connolly, and he's a storytelling comedian. He's an absolute shambles on stage. Yes. He has no idea what he's doing most of the time.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it funny. So we're not comparing ourselves to the great Sir Billy Connolly, but I quite like that journey of going on to. I mean, a lot of one-liner comedians struggle with telling stories because they can't handle the silence.
Yes.
And that's what it is. But if you can get over that silence, that maybe even if it's 30 seconds, it can feel like 5 minutes.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Getting through that silence, you have to get through that silence when you're telling a story. Once you've got over that silence, and then you hit them hard, then it's great. I don't know if you find that when you're having a particularly bad gig and you're trying to tell an anecdote about something, but you're not getting last in between it, and then because of that you don't actually hit home the punchline at the end of it.
Yes.
And you just wasted 2-3 minutes of silence for nothing. It's the worst feeling.
I've done that, absolutely. Oh yeah. But of course I've developed a lot of techniques to try and avoid failure as well. But what's interesting, of course, is when you've tried every single one of them, and then I've said to audiences, listen, I've tried everything I know. I tried every single technique that I have. I've shouted at you, I've sat down, I've walked over there, I've come into the audience, I've spoken to you, I've tried to banter, I've done a story, I've done jokes. All that's left is the two things I don't do, which is singing and nudity. So thank you very much, good night.
Yeah.
But you're right. It can be painful. But then all comedy is painful sometimes. When if it's not working, then it's painful. I don't care. I'll hear people say, "I do bang bang bang, joke joke joke."
Yeah.
Really? When it doesn't work, all you're doing is talking and pausing lots of times to silence. So I'm not knocking one-liner comedians. It's a different thing.
Yeah, different technique.
I put one-liners and jokes in my stories.
Definitely.
Always do,
definitely.
Always have done. And always will. And what I try and do, and this sounds really pretentious now, but I try to create a narrative in the room at the same time. So that way, not only do you have the narrative that you're coming up with, but if you've got some characters in the room, you have, the narrative within the room, and that makes it appear. That creates the illusion then that it's unique to them. And sometimes it is unique to them. Sometimes you get amazing characters and you think, wow, I wouldn't swap this for anything. I've said that to me. I said that to someone on Thursday night, actually. I said I would not have missed you for the world. And I really meant it. So I've got the stories going, I've got the various jokes going, I've got the interaction, and then I've got a woman who worked in housing and accommodation who was clueless about a lot of things, but a great deal of fun. So there's a lot going on in the room. There's a lot going on. And that's what I enjoy. It's sort of spinning plates. So, so yeah, I tell stories, but the main thing is entertainment. And I try and entertain people by whatever means necessary, really.
And putting the audience first in that sense. One, for a start, your respect for the audience is something that's making you likable, even if it's subconscious and you won't even notice it, or people might not notice it, but the fact that you have that high level of respect for them, and that if you're not on board with stories today, then I'm going to entertain you in another way. You're here to be entertained. You're here to have a break from all the difficult things that are going on in the media and the news and things. And I'm going to entertain you, and you're going to have a great time. We're all going to leave with a smile on our face.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether I try my new material or not, whether I get my 20 minutes of my hour sorted tonight, whether I rally off some of the jokes that haven't been working or not. The important thing is actually just have a good night. You're here for entertainment, and that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah, very much so. That's how I approach it. That's how I approach it. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to sort of walk out with a clipboard and just tick off jokes as I'm going along, and I get why people do that. But as I keep saying, or as we have said, there's no right or wrong way of doing this, really.
One of the things with comedy, we're so used to driving up and down the country, driving around, taking trains, sometimes putting ourselves at risk. You never know how an audience is going to take our content and the things we speak about. But you've taken that to a completely new level, and you're speaking to people that, as you mentioned yourself, like retired criminals. Have you ever felt like almost breached or vulnerable when you're speaking to these criminals? Or I shouldn't say criminals, because we covered that earlier, but these people that have had a past of crime.
Well, no. I mean, to begin with, of course you're going to be a little bit nervous about it because you don't know them, and if you believe what you see on television, it's crazy, isn't it, to go and meet somebody with a reputation. But someone pointed out very quickly to me, look, I wouldn't invite you to my house if I was going to hurt you. That made me an idiot. I might be a retired criminal, but why would I have you in my house? And so because I'm meeting up with them and I'm speaking about them, and I'm not meeting the crime, I'm meeting the person. So, there's no judgment on my part. For some reason, I have a bit of rapport with them. So, and also I think the fact that it's because, of course, they're very much aware of what happened to Martha as well, about her getting attacked. So I'm meeting them just as a person. So I don't really have any need to be afraid. Of course I safeguard, but then they try and protect me as well, weirdly. Like a guy recently who, it's called The Animal, the episode's called The Animal. He was a really nice guy, and he would say himself, he's always got that desire there to be extremely violent. And he said, I have a reputation as a hard man and I really hate it. But the first thing he said to me was, look, if you want to bring anybody with you, then you can. And I said, no, thank you. I don't think that's going to be necessary. I'd just like to meet you, one-on-one. And he said to me, well, I was just thinking about stranger danger and I wanted to protect you. So I'm speaking, it's a good question that you've asked, but I'm speaking to people who, yes, of course, if I owed them money, or if I robbed them of their drugs if they were active, then yes, of course I'd be in danger. But there is something about just sitting down with someone as a person and having faith that you're going to be able to connect and build some kind of rapport. And I'm there to speak to them about them.
And I think that's a really important point there, because the other thing about it is that one is on their terms, and so you're not imposing yourself on them. Is that it's all on their terms. The other thing is that they've rarely been listened to, and when they have been listened to, the words that they've spoken have been twisted and used against them.
Very much so, yeah.
So there's an element of trust there already.
Yes.
You're not like an ex-lawyer or an ex-solicitor or a policeman that's put them down. You're somebody that just wants to be a friend and have a chat about them on their terms and get to know them as people.
Yeah, and I have learned a tremendous amount from them. A few of them have said to me, you could have made me look like an idiot and you haven't. You've listened to what I've had to say, and it's been sort of weirdly therapeutic. And I say, well, yeah, it was weirdly therapeutic for me as well. So it works both ways. I'm not there to judge anybody or hurt anyone or misquote anybody. And the biggest thing about it as well is that their stories are always so interesting, or I find them so interesting. And criminals, are all very, very different people. I met a woman in Spain, the mother of Estepona, who's possibly the most notorious criminal I've met. You know, given some of the things that she did. She ran a maximum security prison. You know, I spoke to a guy who was a policeman who took revenge on a guy who attacked his daughter and did jail time for it. I've spoken to a bloke who used to throw hammers at drug dealers. And they're all very, very different people, but I find their stories amazing. So that I don't have to twist or manipulate anything. I can just allow them to get into a space where they feel comfortable with me, and they'll talk. And I can share these amazing stories with people. And they are. Each story is very different.
Have you found them reaching out to you more since you made contact with them?
Well, I stay in touch with people. I have quite an interesting phone book now as well. As you
I'm
can
sure
imagine.
you do, yeah.
So it's and also I want people to sort of understand what I'm saying here. A few people along the journey have said to me, "Do you want me to beat up the guy who attacked Martha?" And I've always said, "Well, that's very kind of you, but no. You know, I made a promise to her I wasn't going to do anything. I'm not a violent man, and that is very kind of you." But without exception, they've always shook my hand and said, "Well done. Well done." I remember one guy saying to me, "Well, it was a sincere offer." He said, "But I really respect you for saying no. Well done. You're a good guy." And that's
nice to
interesting.
hear.
Yeah, it is nice to hear. Yeah, so it is. That's what I mean by weirdly therapeutic. So, of course, I'm not glamorizing crime in any way, but neither am I looking down on anybody. I'm just meeting the person. And it has proved to be, yeah, like I said, fascinating for me. Honestly, I love that podcast. I'm glad to be doing it.
Yeah. Have you got big plans for it? More to come?
Just more. Just more.
Yeah.
I'm going to get Martha on there. Because, of course, I tell her about the people I've spoken to. And they do put a lot of trust in me as well, which I respect. And I never break their trust. And I never disrespect them. And it's nothing to do with fear. It's just about, you know, we all know what the right thing to do in life is. So I try and do the right thing. But I tell Martha about these people. And she always gives me a very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
On what they've done, and she'll say, "Well, actually, that sounds a lot worse than it is, and here's why." Or sometimes she'll go, "Oh, that's a lot more sinister than you realise." So I get a very interesting perspective from her.
It sounds like, to me, and it's really evident and really sort of refreshing to hear, that Martha's had a real sort of positive impact on your life.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've been together for 14 years now, so she has, and I'm very blessed. Yeah, we are blessed, I think. And she is quite an amazing storyteller herself.
She seems to have some good advice for comedy as well.
Oh, she's given me great advice. She knows how I work and how I operate, and she knows me. You know, if you're with someone for that long, it's not that long. I mean, we're looking at least another 14 years, I'm hoping. But we know each other extremely well. So, you know, we kind of help each other.
Yeah. And do you turn to her for advice after gigs, or when you've had a particularly bad time with comedy, or?
Well, I do, but you're going to bear in mind that she works. She does these amazing Edinburgh shows, but she is a writer as well, so she's writing stuff. But she works in quite serious jobs. I mean, so for example, she worked in a woman's refuge, and she came home one day and said to me, "Oh yeah, one of the perpetrators turned up, and he had a hammer." And he said to me, tell me where my missus is, and I'm going to, smash your head in with this hammer. That puts a bad gig into perspective.
Yes, that teaches you a lesson, and
it
straight
really
away,
does.
yeah.
And she got the hammer off the guy within a couple of minutes, made sure that he was stood in front of the camera in case anything did happen, so the police would be able to see it, and just phoned the police, and everything was sorted. But that was just... didn't happen all the time, but that was one incident. And she's works in other areas now that if you met her, she would tell you about, and so yes, she does, but she has a wonderful ability to sort of put things into perspective.
Yeah, it's a skill we could all learn from, I think.
Very much so.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really want, well, not just for obvious reasons, but you mentioned your phone book is particularly interesting, and if and when your comedy career booms and you are famous, I really hope that you get onto, I don't know, Michael McIntyre's big show as a celebrity guest, Send to Wall thing, where he does that Send to Wall thing.
Yeah.
I could imagine sending the text to these ex-convicts that you've interviewed and the responses you may get back live on air.
I would love that, of course. No, I would. I mean, the long-term ambition, I want to succeed, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to sit here and belittle or berate anybody. You know, I'm just going to try my best to succeed in the best way possible. I want to succeed in comedy, but also I want the stories of these extraordinary people to be told as well. You know, I think at the moment people say, oh, it's glamorizing crime. That's the accusation of people who do this type of thing, and I get that, but it's not about that. I honestly believe I have a rapport with former criminals. I'm going to stick my neck out and say, I'm just going to say that nobody has, but very few people have. And I'm coming at it from a perspective that certainly no one else has had. I don't think someone who's been on the receiving end of a crime has just said, right, I'm going to go and speak to criminals.
No, definitely not. I've never come across it. It would be a very interesting one, and I'm sure it wouldn't be the best thing to do, but very interesting to speak to someone who's committed a similar crime to what's been committed to Martha. Have you spoken to someone that's done similar to somebody else?
No, I haven't, because I don't know how I'd react to that, to be honest with you. I would speak to somebody if maybe, you know, it's a difficult one, because people have said to me, would you speak to the guy who attacked Martha? And I don't know. I don't know if it would be...
Can act as a trigger, kind of, that's the trigger. So.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it could do. And I don't know if it would do me any good. I don't know how Martha would react to that. And I don't actually think the guy, because the guy was on steroids and, you know, and on cocaine. So what's he going to say? You know, I was on the juice. I couldn't control myself. I was snorting and dealing coke, and I attacked a woman. Yeah, it's you can't really be insightful about that, I don't think.
No, that's true. That's true. So given how you felt about what happened to Martha all those years back,
yeah,
and how far you've gone with this podcast and the ground that you've broken with it, what are your thoughts now on the crime that's committed against her?
Well, my thoughts on the crime that was committed against her, the main thing is, for me personally, I kept my word. I didn't do anything to hurt the guy. I just went to speak to criminals. And initially I spoke to an old school guy who said, just walk away, son, because he's a drug dealer and it doesn't end well for drug dealers, just in general. So I did the right thing in walking away. How do I feel about the crime? I see the effects of it every day still.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and look, it's 13 years ago. It's a long time. And I'm also very much aware that people go through a lot worse. They do. So, you know, somebody said to me, one of the criminals said to me, look, you know, I like you, but you do realise that you could have killed her. You could have been pushing her around in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. He said, you need to just take what you have and move on. And, you know, and I've moved on. And of course, there are bad days when life isn't good. Sometimes on a bad day, because listen, even I have bad days, right? We all have them. There are days when I think to myself, oh, great, you know, I've been walked all over again. What kind of a man am I? Very occasionally. I'm just being really honest with you. Every now and again, I think, what kind of a man am I? You know, I can't stand up to a comedian putting me down or a promoter putting me down or something going wrong. Even somebody in the street being rude to me. You know, oh, well, I'm not a proper man. You know, yeah, your missus and he got kicked to death. And you didn't do anything about that because you're not a real man. And that's why now, you know, you're struggling with the cashier in Sainsbury's. But that is only a very rare day that happens. Very rare. Thankfully, because it's such a long time ago. Now, I just feel lucky to have the missus, lucky to have the experience of meeting all these people as well. You know, they are actually quite comical. They can be very funny people. They can be great company. And I went to a bare knuckle boxing event, for example, and they had security there. Not because it was going to kick off, just to guide people in. The security guy said to me, who are you, mate? And one of the voices of the organisers went, it's all right, he's with us. And I walked in a foot taller, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I said to him, God, I feel a foot taller. And he went, yeah, nice, isn't it? Now, I know that's not real, but I'm getting an insight into a world that I never even knew existed. And I've come to terms with a lot of things about myself as a man as well as a result. And so that's never a bad thing, you know. And after it happened, I made myself a promise. It's stupid, really, to make promises like this, but I promised myself that if Martha was going to be all right, I would be a better man. And I have tried genuinely to make that promise.
I'm sure she'd say that you have achieved that.
Tried.
Tried. She's a comfortable woman. She'd joke about it, I'm sure. I think you need to give. You say these difficult days where you question yourself in your manlyhood and whatever the term is, or your macho-ness, or whatever these sort of arbitrary terms are. I think the fact that you've reacted in such a positive way with speaking to these criminals that clearly helped them, get things off their chest, to speak about and to feel like they have got worth, because often that's what turns people to crime. It's because no one's listening to them, so they have to do something extreme to be noticed. And unfortunately, there are sometimes really, really poor and awful consequences to that. But to get that affirmation and that confirmation from the guys themselves that they see you as a bigger man and a better man because you're able to not necessarily forgive, but you're able to accept that this has happened, I can't change the past, and violence is not the answer. And to get that from them themselves, who have used violence as an answer, or I think it's incredible.
Oh yeah, it is absolutely. And one guy, I actually asked him. I said, "Look, am I a coward because I didn't do anything?" And he said to me, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Well, not really." And he said, "Well, I have a big reputation." He said, "Bear in mind," he said, "you don't really know who I am." He said, "You've walked up the hill to my house. You've been here all day. There's quite a few people who are here. He said, you don't know who they are either." He said, "You're scared, aren't you?" I went, "Yeah." I said, "I am," because it's the first time I met him. He said, "Yeah, but you're still here." He said, "So we never, ever have to talk about you being a coward again." And that really stayed with me, because that's very compassionate. And he wasn't trying to manipulate me. He just said, you might be scared, but you're not acting like a coward. So
it's a very brave thing to do.
We can move on from this. And I suddenly realised, oh yeah, there's a lot to you. I like you, and I like your wisdom. So, I've learned a tremendous amount. And that was the guy who said to me one day, I used to wear leather jackets. He said to me, "Why do you wear leather jackets?" And I said, "Well, I like them." He went, "No, you don't." He said, "You're trying to hide." He said, "You are too big a man to hide." And I went home and I said to Martha, "Listen, I can't wear these things anymore." And I threw them away. And then I saw him about 3 years later. I mean, I've kept regular contact with him anyway, but we're in a car about 3 years later. And I told him about that. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You know what?" He said, "We like you." He said, "You'd be surprised how many people are in our company, retired though we are, who within about 6 weeks of knowing us will get a tattoo and shave their head." He
Really?
said, "Yeah." He said, you're the same bloke you've always been." That's not quite how we put it. He put it more explicitly than that. But,
I'm sure, yeah.
But he said, and we love you for it. And that made me feel good. So it's been a weird, like I said, I describe them as weird life coaches, but it's made me more confident in myself as a person. It's made me understand violence a lot more. I don't like violence, but I get it. And so walking away isn't quite so bad.
Yeah. So, with all of that building into this, what's your next plan with comedy?
Next plan with comedy, do another show. It's always that. It's always do another show. Get better, keep writing, keep working, keep enjoying it as well. That's another thing. Don't forget to enjoy it, it's a luxury to do what we do. And I don't want to sound precious, but it is. It's a great thing to do, It's a great thing to stand in front of an audience. So I just want to get better as a comedian. I don't believe that I've peaked yet.
You don't believe, and you've been going, 15 years?
Yeah. The best is yet to come. I honestly believe that. Yeah, I sincerely, I really do. They always say that heavyweight boxers mature more. They mature older, and I'm maturing now. I'm approaching the bit where I think I'm going to get good, properly good, and I have to believe that. Otherwise, there'd be no point in me doing it.
Yeah, there's got to be an element of hope. But if you're only feeling like, you're just getting good now, then a lot of us guys have got a long way to go.
we all have a long way to go in life. You know, it's one of those things, you know, and actually I took great comfort from the fact that the retirement age has gone up to 75, isn't it? So, you know, I've got ages now, a long time, you know, you can keep working till you're 75. And yes, on the one hand, oh, it's barbaric, it's Victorian. Yeah, but maybe I can carry on the comedy circuit, you know. 75 is the new 35, who knows?
It doesn't feel like a job, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it is, and it's hard work. And, you know, and obviously when you're catching the night train back from Newton Abbot and there's drunk people on the train and, you know, and you're trying to sleep and you're a big guy and your back's hurting and you think, I've got a day off and then I've got to go up to Dundee, then it feels like hard work. But it is a privilege, really, to do what we do.
It is. Well, I don't really know how to finish this, Matt. It's been an absolutely incredible conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been very insightful for me, and
thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it as well. I'm putting myself in your shoes, and I'm kind of thinking, I don't know how to wrap this one up. I said I don't do singing or nudity, so I can't even sing us out. Yeah,
I knew for a while that you had a podcast, and it was quite amusing when we were first formally introduced. When I first started, I listened to your podcast, interestingly, before I knew who you were.
Okay.
And what was amusing is when we first got in contact about doing the podcast. It's quite a while ago now, nearly a year ago.
Yeah.
I'd said that I'm also great as a guest.
Oh yeah, of course.
For a podcast.
Yes, I remember that.
And then. Instantly afterwards, I made the connection between the podcast I listened to about criminals and then this is Matt. I seen Matt Price perform, and I didn't know that these two things were connected. And then I was like, but I do need to caveat that I'm not a criminal.
Yes,
so I might not be the best guest for your podcast.
I remember that. That is funny, actually.
Because at that time, someone had mentioned that you did a podcast, and I just hadn't made that connection. But anyway, we're here now. We've done the podcast.
Yes, we have.
I think it's been a really great conversation.
Thank you.